The massive Kethver fleet moved through space like a pack of silver wolves hunting in the darkness. 200 warships cut through the void, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. At the front of this deadly parade flew the flagship Sovereign's Pride. Carrying Admiral Wu Jin and his most trusted officers, Wu Jin stood on the bridge, his hands folded behind his back as he stared at the viewscreen. Ahead of them lay their destination, a swirling mass of red and orange, gas that looked like fire frozen in space. The other species called it the Crimson Nebula, but spacers had a different name for it. They called it the Zone. Admiral said Lieutenant Haijin from her station, "All ships report ready. 200 vessels, all weapons and shields at full power." Wu Jin nodded without taking his eyes off the screen. The Coalition Council had given him clear orders. Find out what the humans were doing in the outer regions of space. Watch them. Learn their secrets. The humans had been expanding too fast, too successfully. They went places other species feared to go, and somehow always came back alive. "Sir," called out Ensign Biorum from the communications station, "we're getting strange readings from inside the nebula. Energy patterns unlike anything in our databases." "Probably just natural phenomena," Wu Jin replied. "The Kethver have handled worse. Take us in." The fleet began to move forward into the swirling red mists. At first, everything seemed normal. The ships maintained perfect formation, their advanced sensors mapping every particle of dust and gas around them. But as they pushed deeper into the zone, things started to change. Biorum's voice carried a note of concern. "Admiral, our long-range communications are getting weaker. The quantum links between ships are starting to fluctuate." Haijin looked up from her tactical display. "Sir, I'm seeing power variations across the fleet. Nothing dangerous yet, but our systems are working harder than they should be." Wu Jin frowned but pressed on. The Kethver had never retreated from a challenge. Their technology was the most advanced in the galaxy. Their adaptive shields could handle any energy discharge, and their quantum weapons could punch through any defense. Whatever was in this nebula, they could deal with it. But then the whispers started. It wasn't sound, exactly. It was something else, something that seemed to crawl through the ship's metal walls and into the bones of every crew member. A vibration that felt wrong, like reality itself was being stretched and twisted around them. "What is that?" Haijin asked, her voice tight with fear. Before anyone could answer, the lights on the bridge began to flicker. Not the normal flicker of electrical problems, but something stranger. The light seemed to bend and curve in ways that hurt to look at. Hands flew over her controls. "Admiral, I'm losing contact with the outer ships. The communications array is. It's not broken, sir. It's like the signals are going somewhere else." Through the viewscreen, Wu Jin could see the other ships in his fleet, but something was wrong with them too. Their shapes looked distorted, as if he was seeing them through water. Some appeared to be stretching, growing longer and thinner. Others seemed to be folding in on themselves. "Full stop," he ordered. "All ships, full stop." But his orders never reached the other vessels. The communications system was completely dead now, though all the equipment showed it was working perfectly. The sensation in the walls grew stronger. It felt like something vast and invisible was pressing against the ship from all sides. The metal groaned and creaked, but not from physical stress. It was something else, something that made no sense according to everything they knew about physics. "Sir," whispered Chief Engineer Taman over the intercom. "The engines are still running, but we're not moving through normal space anymore. I don't know how to explain it, but we're somewhere else." Through the viewscreen, the red mists of the nebula were changing. What had looked like random swirls of gas now seemed to have patterns, designs that looked almost like writing in a language no one had ever seen. And within those patterns, shapes moved. Huge, impossible shapes that existed in too many dimensions. At once, Haijin's tactical display went crazy, showing readings that couldn't be real. Energy signatures that registered as both infinitely large and impossibly small at the same time. Mass readings that changed from positive to negative and back again with each sensor sweep. "Admiral," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I think we're not alone in here." The feeling of being watched settled over the bridge like a heavy blanket. Something was looking at them, studying them, judging them. And whatever it was bigger and older and more powerful than anything the Kethver had ever encountered. Wu Jin opened his mouth to give new orders, to try to get his fleet out of this nightmare, but the words never came. Space around them folded like paper being crumpled by giant hands. And the Sovereign's Pride simply ceased to exist in any dimension that normal matter could survive in. The last thing any of them saw was a flash of light that contained colors that had no names, and then everything went dark. 3 weeks had passed since the Kethver armada vanished without a trace, and the news had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In the grand halls of the Coalition headquarters on Nexus Prime, emergency meetings ran day and night. No one could understand how 200 of the most advanced warships in known space could simply disappear. Commander Nayoung sat at her desk in the intelligence division, surrounded by data screens and reports. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but she couldn't stop working. The mystery of the missing fleet consumed her thoughts. She had been investigating for weeks, but the more she learned, the more questions arose. Her assistant, Lieutenant Min, knocked on her door. "Commander, the emergency council session is about to begin. They're expecting your report." Na-young gathered her files and made her way to the council chambers. The massive room was packed with representatives from dozens of species, all talking in hushed, worried voices. The disappearance of the Kethver fleet had shaken everyone's confidence. If such a powerful armada could vanish completely, what did that mean for the safety of the galaxy? At the front of the chamber, the human ambassador Ji-hoon sat alone in the section reserved for Earth's representatives. Na-young noticed how the other delegates kept glancing at him with suspicious eyes. Some whispered behind their hands, pointing in his direction. "Commander Na-young," called out Council Chairman Veltrak, "please present your findings." Na-young walked to the center of the chamber, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "Honored council members, our investigation into the Armada's disappearance has uncovered several disturbing facts." She activated the holographic display, showing the debris field that scout ships had found in the Crimson Nebula. "The wreckage tells us very little. We found pieces of whole metal, but they've been changed somehow. The atomic structure is different, as if the metal had been exposed to forces we don't understand." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Counselor Zethmar from the hegemony leaned forward. "What about the energy readings? Surely your sensors detected something." "They did," Na-young replied, calling up another display. "But the energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. They're not from any known weapon or natural phenomenon." The counselor's crystalline features hardened. "Commander, is it not strange that human ships were seen near the zone just days before our fleet entered?" All eyes turned to Ambassador Ji, who remained calm despite the accusatory stares. Na-young felt uncomfortable with the direction this was taking, but she had to report the facts. "It's true that human merchant vessels were detected in the area," she admitted, "but they were outside the nebula, following established trade routes." "Established by whom?" demanded Counselor Rixvan from the Outer Worlds Alliance. "Humans seem to have remarkable success in regions that destroy our ships. How do you explain that?" Ambassador Ji-hoon finally stood up. "With respect, Counselor, we have no more knowledge of what happened to the Kethver fleet than you do. We had no ships in the Crimson Nebula at the time of their disappearance." But Na-young's investigation had already revealed information that made her doubt those words. After the public session ended, she returned to her office and pulled up the files she'd been studying. The data was troubling. Human ships had been operating in dangerous regions of space for over a century, places where other species lost vessels. Regularly, humans seemed to navigate with ease. Their casualty rates in what they called anomalous zones had dropped to almost zero in the past 50 years. That kind of improvement didn't happen by chance. Lieutenant Minho entered her office, carrying more reports. "Commander, I've been checking the shipping records like you asked. Human vessels don't just avoid losses in these zones, they actively seek them out. They use them as shortcuts between star systems." Na-young studied the data. "Look at this pattern, Minho. Human ships approach these zones differently than everyone else. They power down their weapons, reduce their speed, and broadcast strange signals before entering. Strange signals, musical patterns mixed with mathematical sequences. Always the same basic structure, but with variations." Na-young highlighted the relevant sections. "It's almost like they're announcing themselves. Like they're asking permission to enter." Minho's eyes widened. "Permission from what?" That was the question that kept Na-young awake at night. Permission from what indeed? The official reports claimed these regions contained natural spatial anomalies, dangerous but predictable phenomena that could be navigated with proper caution. But the human behavior suggested something else entirely. She pulled up another file, this one containing testimony from survivors of ships that had encountered problems in anomalous zones. Most were from other species, but there were a few human accounts. The human stories were different. They spoke of entities and guardians in these regions. They talked about showing respect and peaceful intentions. Other species dismissed these accounts as the ravings of traumatized survivors. But what if they weren't? What if humans knew something about these zones that the rest of the galaxy didn't? Na-young made a decision. She would request permission to conduct a joint investigation with human authorities. If they were hiding something, she would find out what it was. The disappearance of 200 Kethver ships demanded answers, and she would get them. As she prepared her request, she couldn't shake the feeling that this mystery was bigger than anyone realized. The whispers in the corridors were growing louder, and they all pointed to the same conclusion. Somehow, the humans were involved in the Armada's fate. The question was how. The joint investigation ship Truthseeker moved slowly through space, toward the Crimson Nebula, carrying both coalition and human crew members. Commander Na-young stood in the briefing room with Captain Dongwu of the Human Navy, studying holographic maps of the mysterious region where the Kethver fleet had vanished. "Your people have been studying these areas for a long time," Na-young said, watching the human captain's face carefully. Over 100 years, according to our records. Captain Dongwu nodded slowly. We call them fold space anomalies. They're dangerous if you don't understand how they work, but you do understand them, Nayoung pressed. Human ships rarely have accidents in these zones anymore. Your success rate is almost perfect. The captain's jaw tightened slightly. We've learned through experience. Many of our early explorers didn't come back. We had to figure out the rules the hard way. Nayoung activated another display showing human ship movements over the past 50 years. These aren't random explorations, Captain. Your vessels follow very specific patterns when they enter anomalous zones. The same signals, the same approach, routes, the same protocols every time. Dongwu was quiet for a long moment. We follow the procedures that work, the ones that keep our people alive. It looks almost like a ritual, Nayoung observed, as if you're performing some kind of ceremony before entering these regions. The human captain turned away from the display. Maybe that's not such a wrong way to think about it. As their ship approached the edge of the Crimson Nebula, Nayoung noticed the human crew becoming more tense. They moved with practiced efficiency, but there was something different in their behavior. They spoke in whispers and handled their equipment with extra care, as if they were preparing for something sacred. Chief Science Officer Mi Kun, who was human, began running checks on systems that seemed to be working perfectly. Captain, all approach protocols are ready. Communication array is prepared for contact sequences. Contact sequences, Nayoung asked. Contact with what? Dongwu and Mi Kun exchanged a look. Commander, the captain said carefully, what would you do if you discovered that these dangerous regions of space weren't empty anomalies, but someone's home? The question hit Nayoung like a physical blow. Someone's home. You mean there are inhabitants in these zones? Before Dongwu could answer, their sensors began detecting strange readings. The view screen showed the swirling red and orange gases of the nebula, but now there were other things visible within it. Structures that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, shapes that hurt to look at directly. Those readings are impossible, breathed Lieutenant Minho from the science station. The energy signatures are off the charts, but they're not random. There's definitely intelligence behind them. Nayoung felt a chill run down her spine. Are we in danger? Not if we follow the proper procedures, Dongwu replied, moving to the communication station. Instead of sending out normal radio signals, he began broadcasting a complex pattern of sounds and mathematical sequences. It was beautiful in a strange way, like music mixed with pure mathematics. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The chaotic energy around their ship seemed to organize itself into patterns. Nayoung could feel something vast and alien focusing its attention on their small vessel. It was like being examined by a mind so large that her own thoughts felt like whispers in comparison. The first human ships that entered zones like this were destroyed, Dongwu explained while continuing the broadcast. But a few survived long enough to realize that something was trying to communicate with them. It took decades to figure out how to talk back. Talk back to what? Nayoung demanded. Entities that exist partially outside our normal space and time, Mi Kyung answered from her station. They're ancient, probably older than any of our civilizations. They don't experience reality the way we do. The structures outside were becoming more visible now, impossible architectures that seemed to shift and flow like liquid light. Nayoung realized that what she had thought were natural phenomena were actually constructed by intelligence. They're not hostile, Dongwu continued, but they are territorial. They protect their space from intruders who come with bad intentions. The HFY came with weapons. Nayoung realized 200 warships, all with active targeting systems and weapons powered up. They entered the zone, scanning for threats and tactical advantages. The captain's voice was grim. To the entities here, that looked like an invasion force. So they defended themselves. They removed the threat. The entire HFY fleet was folded into a dimensional space where normal matter can't exist. They're not dead, but they can't affect our reality anymore. Nayoung stared at the impossible structures surrounding them. Can they be brought back? The entities are willing to release them, Dongwu said, but only if the HFY agree to approach these regions peacefully in the future. No weapons, no aggressive scanning, no territorial claims. The implications were staggering. These beings had power that made the galaxy's greatest military forces look like children playing with toys. And somehow, humans had learned to communicate with them, to earn their trust and safe passage through their domain. How long have you known about this? Nayoung asked. Officially, we've suspected for about 50 years, but we've been keeping it quiet because we knew how the rest of the galaxy would react. Around them, the alien structures pulsed with what might have been approval or acknowledgement. Nayoung realized that everything she thought she knew about the balance of power in the galaxy was wrong. Deep inside the Crimson Nebula, the Truth Seeker drifted through space that didn't follow normal rules. Commander Nayoung gripped her chair as impossible shapes moved outside the viewports. Buildings that existed in multiple dimensions at once, twisted and flowed around their ship like living things made of light and shadow. This is incredible, whispered Chief Science Officer Mike Young, staring at her instrument readings. The quantum signatures are massive. These structures are definitely built by intelligence, but they exist in spaces that shouldn't be able to hold them. Captain Dongwu stood at the communications station, his fingers moving across the controls in patterns that looked like he was playing a musical instrument. The sounds coming from the speakers were strange but beautiful, mathematical sequences, mixed with melodies that seemed to come from another world. The beings that live here, Dongwu explained quietly, don't experience time and space the way we do. They exist in multiple dimensions at once. They're older than our civilizations, maybe older than our species. Nayoung watched the alien structures pulse with different colors. Are they, alive? In a way that's hard to understand, Young replied. They're not biological life as we know it, but they think and feel and communicate. They have their own culture, their own society. Suddenly, the space around them seemed to shift. The random movements of the structures became more organized, more purposeful. Young felt something vast and ancient turn its attention toward their small ship. It was like being noticed by a mountain or a star, something so large and powerful that her mind could barely process it. They're responding to our communication, Dongwu said. They want to know why we're here. He adjusted the broadcast, adding new patterns to the musical mathematics. The response came immediately, not as sound, but as something that seemed to speak directly to their minds. Images flooded Nayoung's consciousness, vast libraries of knowledge, cities that existed in folded space, beings of pure energy moving through dimensions like fish through water. They're showing us their world, Young gasped. Commander, they're trying to help us understand. More images came. Nayoung saw the history of the zone entities stretching back millions of years. They had built their civilization in the spaces between normal reality, creating homes and dimensions that other species couldn't even detect. They were peaceful by nature, but fiercely protective of their territory. Then she saw the arrival of the HFY fleet. The images showed 200 warships entering the nebula with weapons charged and targeting systems active. To the zone entities, it looked like an invasion. These beings had watched younger species destroy each other with violence for millennia. They had learned to recognize the signs of aggression. They tried to warn the HFY, Dongwu said, reading the alien communication. They sent signals, but the fleet interpreted them as attacks and powered up their weapons even more. Nayoung saw what happened next. The zone entities, protecting their home, had simply folded the entire HFY fleet out of normal space. It wasn't an attack, it was more like a parent putting dangerous toys away from children. Where are they now? She asked. In a dimensional pocket, Young replied, studying the new data flowing into her systems. They exist in a state of suspended animation. They're conscious but can't affect the physical world. Are they suffering? No, Dongwu said after receiving more communication from the entities. They're just waiting. The zone entities don't want to hurt anyone. They just want to protect their home. Nayoung felt another wave of images. This time she saw the early days of human contact with the zone entities. The first ships that had survived encounters with these beings had been trading vessels, not warships. They had entered the zones with curiosity rather than aggression, broadcasting music and art instead of weapon signatures. Your people learned to communicate with them, she realized. It took decades, Dongwu admitted. We lost many ships before we figured out the right approach, but eventually, we learned that these beings value peaceful intention above everything else. The images showed human ships approaching the zones with weapons powered down, broadcasting messages of friendship and wonder. The zone entities had been fascinated by human art and music, by the stories and mathematics that represented human culture. They taught us how to navigate the fold space safely, Young added. In return, we shared our knowledge and culture with them. It was a fair trade. Nayoung understood now why humans had been so successful in dangerous regions of space. They hadn't conquered these areas or developed superior technology. They had made friends with the beings who lived there. Can the HFY be released? She asked. The answer came as more images and sensations. The zone entities were willing to return the fleet to normal space, but only if certain conditions were met. The HFY would need to formally acknowledge their mistake and promise to approach such regions peacefully in the future. They want an apology, Nayoung said. More than that, Dongwu replied. They want assurance that this won't happen again. They want the galaxy to understand that these zones aren't empty space to be conquered, but homes to be respected. Around them, the impossible structures pulsed with what felt like agreement. Nayoung realized that the fate of the HFY fleet was just the beginning. This discovery would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about power, about territory, and about the nature of intelligence itself. The zone entities had been watching and waiting for the younger species to grow up. Now it was time to see if they were ready to learn. 6 months later, Admiral Wu Jin stood once again on the bridge of the Sovereign's Pride, but everything had changed. The ship looked the same, the crew worked at the same stations, but the Admiral himself was different. The experience of existing in folded space had changed him in ways he was still trying to understand. He remembered every moment of those months in the dimensional pocket, being conscious but unable to move, aware but powerless to act. The zone entities had not been cruel, they had simply put him and his fleet somewhere safe while they decided what to do. It had been like existing in a dream where you're dreaming but can't wake up. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was packed with representatives from every major species. The great hall buzzed with nervous energy as delegates whispered to each other about what they were about to hear. Commander Nayoung walked to the center of the chamber, carrying the report that would change everything. Honored council members, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. The truth about the Kethver fleet's disappearance is both simple and extraordinary. She activated the holographic display, showing images of the zone entities and their impossible structures. Gasps echoed through the chamber as delegates saw the alien architecture that existed in multiple dimensions. Humanity has achieved safe passage through the galaxy's most dangerous regions, not through superior weapons or secret technology, but through friendship with beings so advanced that our greatest fleets are nothing more than minor obstacles to them. Counselor Vexter from the hegemony leaned forward, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lights. You're saying these entities could destroy any of our forces whenever they choose. Without effort, Nayoung confirmed, but they don't want to destroy anyone. They simply protect their homes from those who approach with hostile intent. Admiral Wu Jin stood when the council chairman recognized him. His voice carried the weight of his strange experience. I was conscious during our time in the dimensional pocket. The entity that held us there showed me things, memories of how humans first made contact with their kind. He paused, looking at the human delegation led by Ambassador Ji-hoon. I saw human ships arriving in the zones with their weapons powered down, broadcasting messages of peace and curiosity. They didn't demand passage or claim territory. They asked permission and offered gifts. The Admiral's words sent ripples of surprise through the assembly. The idea of asking permission to travel through space was foreign to most species. The zone entities showed me human crews sharing their music, their art, their stories. Wu Jin continued. They offered friendship to minds so vast and alien that most of us would never recognize them as living beings. In return, they were granted safe passage through shortcuts that have made them the most efficient traders and explorers in the galaxy. The implications settled over the council like a heavy blanket. Human expansion, their success in dangerous regions, their ability to navigate areas that destroyed other ships, it all made sense now. Ambassador Ji-hoon finally stood to address the assembly. We never intended to keep this secret from the galaxy. But how do you explain to civilizations built on military strength that the greatest power comes from approaching the unknown with open hands instead of weapons? Counselor Rixvan from the Outer Worlds Alliance shifted uncomfortably. You're telling us that while we've been building bigger fleets and stronger weapons, you've been making allies with beings that could eliminate us all. We've been learning. Ji-hoon replied simply, learning that the universe is full of intelligence we don't understand, and that violence isn't always the answer to fear. Nayoung brought up another display showing human protocols for entering anomalous zones. Look at their approach methods. They reduce speed, power down weapons, and broadcast what they call friendship signals, combinations of music, mathematics, and artistic expression that demonstrate peaceful intent. And it works. Admiral Wu Jin added, the zone entities judge each species by the intentions they bring to the threshold of the unknown. They've been watching us all, testing us without us even knowing it. The chamber fell silent as the full weight of the revelation sank in. The balance of power in the galaxy wasn't what anyone had thought. The species that seemed weakest, the humans, with their preference for diplomacy over force, had quietly become the most powerful through wisdom rather than weapons. The Kethver fleet has been returned to us whole and unharmed, Wu Jin announced, but the zone entities made it clear that any future approaches to their territory must be peaceful. No weapons, no aggressive scanning, no territorial claims. Commander Nayoung concluded her report with a final observation. The zone entities have been patient with us, but their patience isn't unlimited. They're offering the galaxy a choice. Learn to approach the unknown with respect and curiosity, or remain locked out of the vast networks of space that they control. As the session ended, delegates filed out in stunned silence. The galaxy would never be the same. In the darkness between stars, ancient minds continued to watch and judge, waiting to see if the younger species were ready to grow beyond their need for violence and humanity. Without even realizing it, had become the teachers in a lesson that would determine the future of all galactic civilization. The age of conquest was ending. The age of communication had begun.